It's universally acknowledged that working late always sucks. Even more so when you're working at the SCP Foundation. This unpleasant state of affairs was being experienced by junior researcher Jeffries on March 1st, 2018. His unenviable task was cataloging old digital files that hadn't yet been ported over to the Foundation's new system. Some researchers had to be put on SCP-682 detail. Others were wrangling D-classes into the femur breaker to lure SCP-106 during an escape attempt. Junior researcher Jeffries was probably lucky. The greatest threat he was facing was his coffee running out, or maybe dying of boredom. He had no idea that in the files on the numerous hard drives in front of him, a nightmare was waiting. Something that would not only ruin his night, but potentially rewrite his very understanding of reality itself, even if he survived. What he found was a file marked Document 1763-EX001, created on December 2nd, 1984. Strange. He double-checked the files and found that the Foundation already had an anomaly in the 1763 spot, an interdimensional portal on Wall Street that showcased bizarre performance art, and he didn't have any records that showed a prior SCP-1763 had ever been explained, and thus removed from the roster. There was only one thing to do. He'd pour himself another tall cup of black coffee and get to work. Another leap down the rabbit hole, but this time, he didn't realize how deep the rabbit hole went. Back in 1984, a strange man in an unknown uniform visited a pig farm. He bought 40 of the farmer's largest swine and carted them off to some unknown purpose. Pig farmers are famous for not asking questions they don't want to know the answer to. Bad for business, you see. So this silent arrangement of money changing hands suited them just fine. These pigs, as it turned out, had just been obtained by the SCP Foundation and taken to a containment site in the wilderness about 80 miles away from that very pig farm. You can only imagine the amount of meat that it takes to feed some of the carnivorous anomalies that the Foundation had on site, and these pigs were intended to satisfy the appetite of just one of them, a creature that had first been captured over in the fields of England, where it terrorized the countryside, making livestock and farmers mysteriously disappear by the dozen. Naturally, the Foundation caught wind of the disappearances, worrying that the news could cause a panic if ever someone in the non-anomalous world realized what was happening. They spread false information about accidental deaths and diseases, muddled the waters, and did everything they could to prevent Britain at large from knowing there was a rampaging monster on the loose. Speaking of, the creature itself was huge, at least at the time of capture, 12 meters long, but it had proven exceptionally hard to catch for Foundation field agents stationed in the area. This was due to its primary anomalous capability, a unique form of camouflage that worked by altering the very perspectives of people around it. The more time the creature spent in any one location, both the larger it seemed to become and the harder it was to perceive. They were only able to capture it in the end by using a form of sedative gas that locked it into perceptibility, before carting it into a secure containment vehicle and taking it to the nearest containment site for analysis. This happened to be a little place called Site 94. There, a large containment area was devised, and it was placed inside, with motion sensor deployments of that very same sedative gas should it ever attempt to escape. And it was only a matter of when, not if. 30 members of Foundation personnel had already been killed by the creature since it was first contained. The pigs were taken to a different containment area. One would be taken each day and led with a leash down a long hall towards the secure containment ward, where the entity, now dubbed as SCP-1763, was waiting to be fed in its cell. Agent Harker was the one on duty this time, leading the pig along. He felt sorry for it almost. It had lived a full life up to this point. He'd read somewhere that pigs were highly intelligent animals. Most of them were as smart as a human child. And now it was just going to be dinner for some incomprehensible entity. What a way to end your life. His musings on the natures of the pig's life were quickly cut off by a horrifying sight. He reached the containment chamber and found it empty. The door, only big enough for a human to pass through, was ajar. Had it escaped? He'd read the file. The creature could alter its morphology. Sure, it typically got bigger, but what if it could make itself smaller? It could fit through the gate and be causing chaos around the facility right now. Agent Harker, in a blind panic, stepped into the containment chamber to assess the situation, and in that moment, his life was over. In the space of a scant few seconds, the air around him seemed to shimmer, as though something was moving that he couldn't quite see. Then, he felt the crushing bite force of jaws closing around his torso, with such strength that the air was pushed out of his lungs. Then, unable to scream, he was dragged back into the containment chamber, and the creature started eating, still completely unseen. Blood splattered the walls and pooled on the floor. When the other agents and guards arrived, they found the cell empty, save for all the blood and a confused pig wandering the halls. It seemed that the unidentified anomalous entity was far more intelligent a predator than they first realized. And worse still, on the rare occasions that the Foundation could see it, it was getting bigger. The second iteration of the file that junior researcher Jeffries read, dated 1989 this time, illustrated that the Foundation had taken a substantial leap in the caution of their containment procedures. Mere sedative gas wasn't enough. They also added corrosive fluid emitters in hopes of physically destroying the creature if it ever tried to harm Foundation personnel again. They also upped its daily diet to 2 adult pigs in hopes to sate the hunger that was becoming an ever-present danger to all personnel working in the sector. But seemingly in tandem with the improvements in security, the creature just kept getting more advanced, more dangerous, particularly in its anomalous mimetic camouflage. It was now 18 meters long, large enough that it could physically overpower anyone that it wanted to prey on. And now, it was able to selectively disguise both its appearance and sounds, making it effectively impossible to detect if you're the one it's after. Its adaptive abilities for stealth now seemed to accelerate at a constant rate, making its perceptibility as unpredictable as its morphology. And it was about to get so much worse. For reasons that were at the time unknown, the Foundation decided to dismantle the containment chamber at Site 94 where the beast was being held. The reason for this seemingly nonsensical action would become clear later, but what was immediately obvious were the consequences of letting the creature loose inside the site. In the space of a single day, hundreds of SCP Foundation personnel were killed. They were just standing around going about their day as the ginormous, imperceptible creature approached them. They didn't even realize anything was happening until the jaws closed around them, just like Agent Harker had experienced all that time before. The break room turned into a bloodbath. All that terrible screaming. The most frightening part was that none of these Foundation employees were able to fight back, despite so many of them being armed and dangerous, in theory. But how can you fight back against something that you don't even know is there? Because this was more than just not being able to perceive that the creature was there. Everyone somehow simply knew that it wasn't. In the same way you know there isn't a giant pink elephant floating above you right now. It seemed that the power of SCP-1763's mimetic camo was now so powerful that it could reach into the minds of everyone around it and edit their thoughts, removing itself and even its victims. That's why the unfortunate staff of Site-94 deconstructed its containment chamber in the first place. In their minds, it was an empty chamber, simply built for no reason. So why was it there, just taking up space where they could be containing more anomalies? They'd unknowingly unleashed their own demise into the facility. And it wasn't even the staff. When the creature ran out of Foundation personnel to kill, it even started killing and consuming the other anomalies kept at the site. It wasn't long until the entire facility was a ruin, with no survivors, being reclaimed by the woods around it. By 1995, people outside the base who were still aware of SCP-1763's existence decided to fence it in. They created a secure perimeter around the entire grounds of the old site, hoping to keep the monster contained so it couldn't reach the wider world and kill who knows how many people. This new containment area was dubbed Area 764. Information about SCP-1763 seemed impossible to proliferate. The official death count of the creature was around 30, despite everyone at the former Site-94 being considered lost. Anyone who entered the vicinity of the creature would lose knowledge of it, being affected by its anomalous perception effect. It was out there, not truly trapped, but rather caged within the illusion of security. Inside the Area 764 exclusion zone, it preyed on anything unlucky enough to still be inside. human or otherwise. But of course, that prey would run out eventually, wouldn't it? It would need to go further afield to get its fill, and that would inevitably lead it to the rest of us. However, if you read the file, you'll see that that simply didn't happen. Instead, the last update on the files regarding SCP-1763-EX didn't even have an object class. It seemed to have stopped existing, if it had ever existed in the first place, along with all of the people who'd once tried to contain it, and the measures for containment put in place. The whole thing had been nullified. There weren't even any remaining containment procedures, as though none were even needed. In the typical cold, neutral tone of Foundation documentation, it dismissed any need to perform further actions regarding the alleged anomaly. The closing words in the file were, "Several other iterations of this article have been located, referring to the entity as a physical creature. It is believed, therefore, that SCP-1763 was at one point both actively contained by the Foundation and not able to exert the range of anomalous phenomena available to it at present. Further interference suggests that SCP-1763's excision of itself from standard methods of perception is part of an ongoing trend, in which the entity is rendered less real over time, possibly as a survival technique, natural adaptation, or as a method of acquiring food. For obvious reasons, no elements of this hypothesis can be verified." After that, any remaining information in the file was corrupted. The trail went cold. Back in 2018, having finished reading the bizarre series of files on the drive, junior researcher Jeffries felt an odd chill creeping down his back. He'd read the file of many terrifying creatures before, but something about this one felt different, felt wrong. It just wasn't adding up. A creature that could alter its morphology, its physical body, as well as people's perceptions of it. Something that kept getting bigger, kept feeding, hunting, killing, all the while becoming harder to perceive as its reality and mind-warping camouflage evolved. He double-checked the records. There was no Site-94, never had been. There was never an Area 764 either, nor were there any records of the supposed deaths that the creature caused. But was that reality? Or just what the creature itself wanted him to see, wanted him to believe? There was no way of telling. After all, the earlier files even said that the creature could edit and censor memories to keep itself concealed. If there was any truth to this, what would stop it from happening one more time? What would stop it from happening to him, right here, right now? Junior researcher Jeffries contacted one of his superiors, a senior researcher who also happened to be working late at the site that night. He needed a second opinion on this. The senior researcher read over the files with stone-faced neutrality, like he was reading the nutritional information on the back of a box of cereal, utterly unmoved by any of it. "This is what we in the industry call a self-cleaning oven, kid," the senior researcher said, getting up from the chair and yawning. "Whatever this story is, it's seemingly sorted itself out. I wouldn't worry too much about it. False reports, prank files written by disgruntled staffers on their last week in the office. People did crazy stuff back in the 80s. And with that, the researcher left, leaving Jeffries alone in the darkened cubicle farm, illuminated only by the dim glow of his computer screen. He went home a couple hours after that, but as he was driving the long wooded back roads to his house, he couldn't help shake the feeling that something was wrong. He looked over his shoulder or at the rearview mirror, seeing a dark and lonely road bordered on both sides by trees, not even a car in sight. He couldn't see anything following. Then again, he wouldn't, would he? Jeffries tried to push the thought out of his mind and keep going. That night, he went to bed and tried his best to sleep off the bad thoughts. The next day, junior researcher Jeffries didn't go to work. Nobody noticed, of course. If you asked anybody, and even checked the official records, it'd be as though he had never even existed in the first place. Now check out terrifying SCP-001 files that will keep you up at night, and most scary horror SCPs that will give you nightmares for more.